Look, you've heard me many times and with Mark Latham talk about the disturbing, very disturbing fallout from the coronavirus response and the extent to which young people have suffered appallingly. We may not know for years the sum total of that suffering, but to add to the worry for parents and the anxiety for children, we then have the issue raised by a simple question: do they learn anything when they go to school? Have the blackboard and chalk been thrown away entirely because while children being denied what should be significant benefits from going to school, and make no mistake, socialising with their friends is one of them, further damage is being done in the classroom itself in what is being taught or not being taught. At the centre of all this is the curriculum and the administrative mess that education is in. Just as we have a federal health minister who doesn't employ a single nurse, we have a federal education minister who doesn't employ a single teacher, though the federal government is responsible, along with the states, for a national curriculum. I have to say the current federal minister, Alan Tudge, has made some very sensible noises in that direction, but he's not responsible for implementing it. The states are. Children represent the collateral damage. There's going to be a meeting in a few weeks of education ministers, including the federal minister, to look at this national curriculum. But to give you an example of what a mess we're in, the Australian Curriculum Assessment Reporting Authority has proposed to postpone the teaching of times tables from Year 3 to Year 4. In some nations, they're taught in Year 2. But even today, you can say to many 10-year-olds, what are 8 sevens? And they'll say, 8 sevens, would that be 56? When these things ought to be automatic, rote learning. But what they will be taught in Year 2, unless changes are made, is how to analyse whether a statue is racist when they're 7. ANZAC Day is a contested idea. Alan Tudge, to his credit, has said he won't cop this, but he doesn't control the classroom. I read today in the Australian newspaper, I just happen to have a copy of Friday, April 21, 2006, and a headline, quote, PM Keynes rubbish teaching. And the story went, John Howard believes that the postmodern literature being taught in schools is rubbish and is considering tying education funding to ending the gobbledygook taught in some states. And he accused state education authorities in 2006 of dumbing down the English syllabus and succumbing to political correctness. That great Australian and distinguished literary scholar, the late Dame Leonie Kramer, criticised then in the story how English was taught in schools and said what worried her was, quote, the notion that you have to read, let's say, Shakespeare in relation to contemporary preoccupations such as race and class. The education minister then was Julie Bishop. Even John Howard would concede it has become worse since then. Dr Kevin Donnelly is a senior research fellow at the Australian Catholic University. He co-chaired the 2014 review of the national curriculum. But a bit like the ABC, nothing changes, things only get worse. Dr Kevin Donnelly joins me. Kevin, John Howard had a go in 2006. Why does everyone fail to implement these changes?
Well, Alan, I remember John Howard at the time. He launched one of my books, Dumbing Down, where we detailed all of this, and he spoke very strongly about the need to overhaul education. But you're right, it is a federal system. The other problem here, it's like the old Industrial Relations Club. You've got the teacher union, you've got subject associations, you've got some academics, not all of them, thankfully, but quite a lot. You've got all of these interest groups, and then you've got the state and territory bureaucracies. They all are singing from the same hymn book. Now, I accept that Alan Tudge is making the right noise, as it were. He's argued very strongly we have to change, but deeds count. And I remember in 2007, Julia Gillard, the then Education Minister, she actually said things would change. We would not have a black armband view of history. But now we have black armband on steroids.
Absolutely. See, children know all about racism and Black Lives Matter and climate change, but they don't know where Bundaberg is. They've never heard of Burke and Wills. They can't recite a word of poetry. I'm not a defeatist, but there is no evidence that anything has improved. And as a result, we've fallen behind comparable international countries and we are betraying our kids. I mean, you mentioned black armband view. John Howard talked about that. But even today, the classroom demonises Western culture and Western civilisation, talks about Invasion Day and genocide, and our institutions are racist. I mean, you make a very valid point when you wrote, of all the lessons to be learned from our older settlers, he's talking about Indigenous Australians, top of the list must surely be a profound respect for the passing on of the knowledge and wisdom of the elders. The Indigenous tradition of oral history epitomises the sense of belonging and purpose that human beings gain from understanding the past, particularly as they deal with the present and make decisions about the future. Kevin, with respect to you, that is a perfect summary of what we should be doing, but it's not happening.
It's not, Alan, and I've argued for some years, and we've spoken about this, that one of the most important, if you're talking about the purpose of education, it really should be focusing on giving young people, future generations, a very good knowledge and understanding of their culture. I mean, yes. We're not India, we're not China, we're a Western liberal democracy.
Yes.
Judeo-Christianity, the Enlightenment, liberalism, these are unique to the West. We should be teaching that. The other point I should make quickly is that in Canada, they have a federal system of government like ours, but there is no ACARA, there is no national curriculum body. If I was Alan Tudge, I'd be getting rid of ACARA, and I'd be getting maybe 10 or 15 experts to look at the different state and territories and actually rank the curriculum and make it public.
I mean, the reality is this. Children are not being taught why Melbourne's called Melbourne or Adelaide, Adelaide. They don't think about Ludwig Leichhardt. Someone must have discovered the Darling Downs, which has become one of the food bowls of the nation, shouldn't we know? And the lessons of life are taught from literature. I mean, Dickens' Great Expectations is about the folly of only pursuing love when it's attached to money. And then there's some things, Kevin, involve rote learning, tables and spelling. I mean, none of this is happening. And in the classroom, nothing changes. See, I've got an answer to this, Kevin. When you and I were kids at school, they had school inspectors. And the inspectors came, they frightened terror out of the teachers and the headmaster. They stood in the classroom and they could see what was being taught, how well it was being taught, and the teacher would be graded according to that, and boom, out the teacher would go if it didn't meet a standard. That's all past. Anything goes.
The only problem, Alan, would be that some of the inspectors who come out of our universities, if they've done teacher education, I probably wouldn't trust.
No.
But the other point here, John Howard made the point, when it came to history teaching, we need a root and branch renewal. The problem was, when it got to the Department of Education, they appointed the very people responsible for the mess to look at history teaching. So obviously nothing changed.
Nothing changed. Good to talk to you, Kevin. Just for our viewers, a poll by the Lowy Institute, believe this is our problem, showed 40% of Australians say non-democratic government may be preferable. Or others said it doesn't matter what kind of government system we have. And that can only mean poor history teaching and poor social studies teaching. Kevin, we keep punching away, but I'm not too sure at the end of the day we're getting too far. But you do wonderful work, and keep out of their ears, Dr. Kevin Donnelly. But I mean, young people have got to be taught that Western political institutions, never perfect, have given one person one vote, democratic government, freedom of association. But many of those things, of course, have been eroded, haven't they? Freedom has been eroded through the coronavirus, and young people think, well, what kind of a world is it? It's a real battle on our hands. It's called education.